To seek Space Ishtar is to court Calamity. Calamity Jane, that is. She's a 4-star archer introduced in Saber Wars 2, which is coming out later this year in place of a new Halloween event. She's on the same banner as Space Ishtar, but does she stand on her own, or is Jane a glorified booby prize? Let's find out. The pillar of Jane's kit is Show Me the Way, O Northstar. It's a targeted buff that gains effects based on how many stars you currently have. It doesn't eat them either, so you can have some fun afterwards. At 0, you only get buff success chance. At 10 stars, you gain a 3-hit crit damage buff. At 20, a star absorption capping at 1500%, also for 3 turns. That's a huge magnitude, like Berserkers can actually crit territory, and in fact, they're one of the big beneficiaries of this effect. That said, it's not a sure deal. Berserkers who have absorption effects tend to go between 3000 and 6000%, so this skill is in the right ballpark, but it's not perfect. You'll want to produce extra stars to increase your odds. The 2 Berserkers that benefit the most from Jane's help are Nerd Alter and Zhang Yu. The former has some nice damage tools, but a very half-assed way of manipulating stars. Better yet, one of her skills dumps 20 stars, letting you get Northstar's absorption effect on demand. As for Zhang Yu, he'll get a star absorption skill of his own, but he'd appreciate the extra consistency. He also has a star income skill, which obviously helps. Avengers also get a lot of value. The 2 most promising ones I could identify are Dantes and Ushi Alter, who both have card-type synergy. Ushi Alter has a strong crit steroid, while Dantes can hit high star values between his NP and dump skill. For the adventurous of you, Demon King Nobunaga can chip in some stars, and cheat very much like absorption and crit damage buffs. At 30 stars, Northstar gains a single turn evasion. Good survivability, of course, though timing its usage with the right number of stars can be tricky. I personally wouldn't rely on it for this purpose. At 40 stars, you get 3 turns of Invuln Pierce. 40 is steep, but a multi-turn targetable Invuln Pierce is kinda nuts. Not relevant for every fight, but it lets you run extremely aggressive CEs in place of Sweet Crystal, which is really nice. At 50, which is the practical limit for stars actually doing anything, Northstar provides 20% charge. A bit underwhelming given the requirement, but the cumulative effect of all these buffs is a tremendous amount of value. And get this, Northstar is on a 5-turn cooldown. If you can generate those stars on a regular basis, you can spam it on the regular. Depending on which effect you need for a particular fight, you can build your team in all kinds of ways to reap the benefits. The most flexible way for the rich and the lucky is to put Fragment of 2030 on Jane and your 3rd frontliner. For quick and decisive fights, you can incorporate Stardom CEs instead. Golden Catches the Carp as starting charge, Crowning Beauty, Creator Glory is something you probably have, and Hide Hunter gives a crit damage buff to its holder. If you need to hit 40 or 50 stars once with precise timing, you can run Amadeus and swap him in with the combat uniform. And if you're running Jane with a Buster Attacker, the Mystic Code Anniversary Blonde comes with a skill that dumps 20 stars. Let's move on to another skill. Galactic Messenger drains all enemies' NP meters by 1 tick and charges your team by 10%. It gives Jane a 3-turn attack buff and has an 80% chance of giving that same buff to her other teammates. If you recall, Northstar gives buff success chance, and if Jane is your main attacker, you obviously use it on her to give Galactic Messenger a guaranteed proc. However, I wouldn't fret too much about this buff either way. In main attacker roles, Jane only needs to worry about her own damage, and in supportive roles, your other servant is getting way more in benefits than just a 20% buff. Though come to think of it, I didn't talk about the applications of buff success very much. The short answer is that a lot of servants with Imperial Privilege type skills either fix their own problems, are sabers or lancers you wouldn't want to run with Jane, or there's not enough card type synergy to really push that as a selling point. The only exception I found was Wu Zetian. She can work with Jane in true double attacker setups. Jane makes her Imperial Privilege work better, and Wu in turn gives back attack and quick buffs. The last of Jane's standard skills is Sabotage. It's an AoE attack and crit chance debuff. Nothing too sexy, but it improves your team's survivability and gives her extra utility in supporting roles. Jane's Noble Phantasm is Space Dead Man's Hand. It's a single target quick attack that ignores evasion. Its overcharge effect nails your target with preemptive defense and quick resistance debuffs, which last 2 turns. The sure hit is nice, but overall, this ain't anything earth-shattering. Jane doesn't have much in the way of looping tools, but you'll still find Scotty a powerful ally. She enables nasty quick crits while also being a charge donator and a more controllable source of evasion buffs. Even in dual attacker setups, you have the option of running her for a ton of extra value. As a main attacker, Calamity Jane is functional but has a number of quirks. First of all, she has a ton of strong passives. Independent Action A+ for crit damage, Riding A for quick performance, and Presence Concealment A for star generation. These are all relevant to her playstyle. But while these look sexy on paper, Jane is undercut by her stat line. It's not quite the 50,000 health in her data mine card, which, if you aren't familiar, Jane's data was in the game for a very long time before her release. But regardless, it's a very health-heavy distribution, and it puts her attack on the low end of 4-star archers. Not to mention her focus on utility comes at the expense of having fewer selfish damage steroids. so in practice you may find someone like Altera the Santa a more impactful main attacker. One cool thing I learned is that Jane gets an append skill down the road. These tend to be samey between servants and usually include damage against a class that you wouldn't fight with them anyway. However, Jane gets damage against foreigners, which is actually intriguing. Fighting extra class servants without having full class advantage is actually a scenario you could realistically opt into, especially since alter egos and foreigners aren't the most convenient classes to acquire for yourself. Neat as it is though, I also learned that one other archer gets an anti-foreigner passive, Altera the Santa. Holy shit, Jane just can't escape her. For craft essences, I have two last picks I'd like to talk about. The first is Traces of Christmas, which is a free CE coming later this year. It gives quick, NP gain, and starting charge, meaning you'll likely be running it for any attempts at turning Jane into your main attacker. The second is her Bond CE, which notably includes a star dump. I wouldn't run it over the other options, but as a Bond CE, you can hypothetically get it year-round, so consider it like a last resort. As for command codes, the Holy Knight's Aurora drops 4 stars, and it's good since it can push you over a threshold to the next effect. There are other flat star CCs if you want to double down, but they tend to not be as good. You can also use crit codes if you plan to run Jane as your main attacker. The one that carries Fortune is something you can slap on your quick cards, and Star Severing Evil Sacred Sword gives crit damage against sabers. Overall, Calamity Jane is a gimmicky but potentially effective supportive attacker. She's not a meta trendsetter or anything, but for those of you who want to take the road less traveled in terms of team building, she opens up options that you wouldn't have had otherwise. A lesser used but still valuable part of the toolbox, in other words. I named a few servants earlier in the video, but really you could run her with anyone that has a quick loadout and preferably either a star dump or star income. You meet those conditions and you've got some fun in the works. And for those of you planning to go hard for Space Ishtar, you may end up with spare copies, in which case you may want to consider esports applications. Keeping her at 3rd Ascension purely for Northstar, equipping Good Poster Girl, and timing her entry after a big star generating turn. Lots of ways to make your own fun with Calamity Jane, if you have a bit of creativity. Thanks for watching. Like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more, and come watch me at twitch.tv/RenoTyson, where I stream every weekend, 3 PM Pacific time, Friday through Sunday. This Friday, I'll be revisiting the Lost Belt 4 story, which I skipped the shit out of so I could farm X faster. I'll probably narrate it, so if you want in on the action, stop on by.